Hey, what's up, guys? I wanted to do this for a while. Go over some films uh, from the German perspective of World War II, particularly near the end or after the aftermath of it. It's always weird in terms of from an American. I'm an American, okay, but I remember my grandparents, my German grandparents, were war refugees. My grandfather was in the Wehrmacht. Many men in my both sides of the family were in the military. Almost all of them died except for my grandfather and my grandmother's cousin. All of them died fighting the Soviets, as is borne out in the numbers of how much of the German military was destroyed in the end by the Red Army. Um, as an in-between person, right? No Americans would probably view these films, right, being subject to more than half century of German villainy propaganda in Hollywood. Conversely, German audiences probably would not take to at least the more recent films, since they are totally indoctrinated to not have any sympathy for their ancestors. It puts me in a weird position. There's no, I don't hide too much. I mean, I guess I do, but I don't really hide too much how I feel about what went down back then, and its effects now, regardless of how I think things should have been. But nearly, notwithstanding, these are all compelling films. I would recommend you watch them in whatever capacity you can do that, and I'll just go through them briefly. Well, actually, no, you know me. I'm gonna spend a few minutes, let's say, uh, on them. But these are recommended. None of them are uplifting films, but I wish there were more films like this. And of course, none of them are American. This film, I only knew about this film because of Andy Nowicki had mentioned it. I think on his channel a couple of years ago. I eventually got my hands on it. Of course, Keira Knightley, we know her, and Alexander Skarsgård, we know him. This guy though, Jason Clarke, this British actor, man, he does a really good job. Essentially, this takes place in post-war Hamburg, right, second largest city in Germany, fifth most bombed city in Germany, big port city. And as you go to this film, it's the winter of '46. Keira Knightley is the wife of this officer here, played by Jason Clarke, going over there to live with him during the occupation, being put up in a mansion by this man. Of course, the British just take the dwellings of the local people. Of course, the local people that still have a building that is left. The CGI in this really conveys the bombed out wreckage that was Germany. Um, and 46 was a better year than the next 2 years that were coming, where there was even less food. It was surprising this is a BBC film that they made this, because in the film they straight up have British occupation soldiers and officers laughing. The idea of, yeah, we're starving them makes them more compliant when they're weak. The BBC made this. I was surprised. Okay, there's a scene where as the Germans are digging through the rubble for the many dead people to clear things out, they find two horribly burnt to a crisp, obviously two lovers, a man and a woman in an embrace. And the British soldiers make a very lewd joke about it, as the Germans who've dug the bodies up look on, not saying a word. You can see in their eyes how they feel. Right? And so now, like I said, the British officer is a very interesting character, very conflicted about what's been done. He's constantly at heads with his superiors, and this very scummy Scottish officer whose wife is a very rumor monger. Now, and also likes to take all the silverware from the Germans. But Keira Knightley, basically, the conflict here is that she, the drama, she falls in love with Skarsgård, whose wife was basically killed in, right, Operation Gomorrah, right? That was where the first firestorm occurred, okay? They killed 50,000 people. I always think it's more, Okay, of course Dresden was far worse, and they say less people died in Dresden than Hamburg. You can see the lies, right? Yeah, you know the Dresden anniversary is coming. I'm gonna do a video for that. But it's interesting to see Keira Knightley. Of course, they have the implausible thing of that their son died in the Blitz. Okay, the numbers for that nowhere being approximate, and likelihood being very less. But it's for dramatic license. Okay, where you see the Germans really don't like them, but they don't really have a choice, and the British really hate the Germans too. So the fact that a romance exists between these two eventually, the love triangle. Well, that's the dramatic thing. That's for the women, right? Some other things in this too. There's actually werewolves in this film. If you know what I'm talking about. But they're shown as being pretty ineffective and rather craven. Um, of course. But nonetheless, it's still a very interesting film. I'm surprised this was made by the BBC, that they would show this. They bombed out wreckage of the cities, the way the Germans are treated, and the cruelty of the British in this is very, other than this character here, who is probably the best character in this film, to be honest. So, I can't believe, dude, you thought that this chick was gonna run off at you? What are you nuts? Are you stupid? Dummkopf. Anyway, but yeah, this was actually this was actually an interesting film, so you can check it out, I think. All right, the bridge, right, der Brücke, right, the Criterion, right, yeah, infamous, infamous, the film. I remember hearing about this film as a kid. Actually, I even think this movie was mentioned, I think, in GI Combat in the letters section. So this obviously was something seen, right? Bernard Vicky, right? The Bridge was the first major anti-war film to come out of Germany after World War II. Right, and basically, right, it's about a bunch of obviously young Bavarian teenage boys conscripted literally in the last days of the war, and they were assigned with an adult officer to basically guard a bridge. Okay, and the whole idea is the officer knows that okay, the bridge is going to be blown. They're going to blow the bridge, and he's going to send these kids home, demobilize them, obviously, and just let the Americans come through, because this is obviously Bavaria. Well, unfortunately for the officer, when he goes to do something, the Polizei think he's a deserter, and they shoot him, leaving these kids with still the idea of defending this bridge, which is meant to be blown. The Americans come, and there is a major battle with these kids, and what a for an anti-war film as usual, right? The way the battle scene was done was actually very impressive for a number of reasons. One, notwithstanding the fact that to make American armor, the filmmakers wanted to have, because you still had American soldiers stationed there, they could borrow some M4s for the battle scenes, but the Americans were like, no, we're not letting you use these tanks to film a movie where they get knocked out and defeated by the Germans, right? So they basically had to make their own Sherman-looking tanks out of trucks. It's very crazy. It's very weird looking at it. When you see it, you can have both views that it doesn't look anything like an M4, and it looks as best you could do for making a tank out of a truck. And you can actually see at the bottom the tires of the truck underneath. But they actually did a great job, I think, with the battle scenes. Now, of course, that's not what you should watch, right? It's a very, right, especially shot using drama, right? The battle scene is really horrific. There's no hold bars in it. Obviously, as you can imagine, these young teenage boys most of them are not going to survive. Of course, the irony is that the Germans the adults who come to blow the bridge at the end, have nothing but derision for the survivors of this. And the whole thing, too, everyone in the village is telling them to just surrender and give up and let the Americans come in, but they're not going to do it. Now, of course, the director here was a left-wing Austrian who was in a concentration camp for being, a traitor to the nation. Oh, I'll say it. And of course, and he took this the novel that this narrative was based on was actually from one of these young men, but it was more of a, I guess, kind of a homage to his friends. And it was a much heroic film. Of course, he made this very anti-heroic. You see, the kids are terrified, but I still like the film, the way it was done. I mean, they give it to the fucking Americans in this, okay, and being the fact that, and maybe implausibly as Volkssturm at the end, they two things: MG42s and Panzerfausts. Okay, whatever you want to say with these kids, you give them those weapons and you give them some ammo, and they're gonna stop any fucking adult army guys from either side coming in. And you see that borne out in this, okay? Which is probably not the intention of the director, who in the interview at the end even said, wrongly, very wrongly, in my opinion, okay, as someone who's anti-war also, okay, it's like it's not enough to fight and to be courageous. You have to fight for the right cause. Really, really. Of course, it's always the right cause when you're the winner, isn't it? Anyway, but still, great film, great shot, very talented director. Notwithstanding, the young teenagers do a really good acting job, and I don't know what else to say. So you should check this out. Um, yeah, you should check it out. All right, this one here. This was a real rough movie to watch. It's a Danish film by a Danish director, essentially about what was done in Denmark with the German POWs that obviously surrendered when the war was over. The vengeful Danes, they used them to basically clear all the mines that the German military had set. This film covers some of the very young teenage boy soldiers that have been conscripted at the last minute and were being used for this task, okay, which is technically against the Geneva Convention, okay, and the fact that the director brings it up, and he's kind of a lefty, he brings it up, is interesting. Okay, Land of Mine. The original Danish title for this is Under the Sand, right, which is actually interesting because it's clearing all the mines. Essentially, you watch this film of these young German POW being brutalized, yelled at, beaten, humiliated, and then randomly being blown to bits. Okay, like I said, it's very hard to watch. Very beautifully shot in the North Sea, Jutland, the northern Germany, the sand dunes, the vast expanses. Cinematographer actually was the director's wife. She did a brilliant job in it. Yeah, it's this is the very brutal. Although he's far from the worst guy in this. His boss is a really nasty piece of work, and the British in this, the British officers who one night I guess are drunk and come to where the young German boys are held, and essentially try to rape one of them, pissing on him, beating him, and then trying to pull his pants down. Yeah, it was a very hard scene to watch. Luckily, this guy who's been pretty mean to them comes in to stop it. Thank fucking God. Like I said, and one by one, many of these boys are blown to bits. Now, it was interesting in the Q&A with the director, a very lefty guy. Obviously, he had mentioned at the time, this was 2015, this came out, mentioned the dawning of the migrant crisis, and how he, of course, he wanted Denmark to let in the refugees. Whatever. I wonder how it feels now, but what's relevant in this is that he was mentioning that, what we Danes did to the German POWs was a war crime, and it was born out of vengeance. Okay, from a country that could not, the man to man could not beat these Germans, but after them being defeated by others, and of course, it's you can tell that the Danes are wearing British uniforms, using the others to then get their revenge in a very unmanly, humiliating, and a disgraceful way. Yeah, so, and he mentioned too, it's interesting though, as a film, 90% of the film is in German. Obviously, when the Danish start talking, you can hear the difference in the language. Um, he says that this movie wasn't well received in Germany. Okay, the Germans are so, and this is what I was talking about earlier in the video. The Germans are so geared to not be able to look at their own people as being victims in any capacity. Okay, the flip side, I would argue that there's no greater victim in the world history than them. Okay, but I'm an in between man. I have no bearing. I have no say. I have no my. There's no future, no destiny for me in Deutschland. Very interesting. Also, the converse that he mentioned that in Asia this film did very well, particularly in Japan. If anything, the old ally will remember more and took to this film more, seeing how these young men were treated. Another interesting red pill mentioned by the director was, yeah, obviously there were a lot of the people that did this job were adult men, but there undoubtedly were young boys, teenagers that were used for this. But I focused on the young teenagers. He goes, because if they had been men in their 20s or older, nobody would have gave a damn about it. Okay, and he's right, isn't he? So, like I said, hard film to watch, but a compelling film and a good film with a pretty cool ending that obviously was not historical in any capacity, but I kind of liked it. I liked how this man here sort of developed over time. And like I said, there's some really rough scenes in here, particularly the twins. When the one twin is blasted to bits, and you slowly see the other twin unravel. It was pretty harsh, pretty poignant. So anyway, enough of this. Just wanted to cover some of these lesser known films about the what the Germans went through, which most of y'all won't care about. So, but I do, and that's enough, I think.